Mactan, Mactan, Mactan. Nabubuhay sa aking isipan tuwing nakikita ang mga larawan, naglalakbay sa malayong nakaraan, isang paraisong nais makamkamp. Isla na kung tawagin ay Mactan. Mactan, Mactan. Kampilan na palasong nagliliparan, sigaw ng bawat pusong lumalaban, dugong dumanak dahil sa karapatan, naninais ng kining ng dayuhan. Mactan, ipagdiwang na ang kalayaan, pasalamatan, laban ay napagtagumpayan. Ipagdiwang ating kasarinlan, ipagbunyi ating kalayaan. Atin to Mactan. Mactan, ipagdiwang ang kalayaan, salamatan, ng laban ay napagtagumpayan. Ang laban ay napagtagumpayan. Ating ipagdiwang ang Mactan. Mactan.
Magandang umaga po sa lahat at welcome sa Countdown to 500 online lectures. Ako po si Ayesha ng National Quincentennial Committee Secretariat. At bago po lahat, balikan lang po muna natin kung ano po yung Countdown to 500 online lectures. So basically, ang Countdown to 500 online lectures po ay nilaunch natin noong araw ng kalayaan. That's June 12. So this is a special program created by the National Quincentennial Committee and the Office of the President in anticipation of the 500 years of the 2021 Quincentennial Commemorations in the Philippines. This is a special collaboration between the NQC, the NHCP, the PCOO, the Presidential Communications Operations Office, which aims to sustain the Filipinos' interest to 500 years in 2021 in this time of COVID-19 pandemic. We are live via Facebook pages of NQC, NHCP, RTBM, LHCN, and other government agencies. Last week, we had a lecture about Mabini and the Malay Freedom with Dr. April Hope Castro. Ngayon, tingnan naman natin, ano ba ang lecture natin today? Tungkol saan ba yung lecture natin today? So, ibato ko po kay Jubilin para i-explain sa atin kung ano yung lecture for this day.
Okay, thank you, Ayesha. This is our fourth online lecture for this year, which is entitled Theorizing the Food Magellan Possibly Ate. So this is being conducted in celebration of the Nutrition Month. So now, what should we expect from this online lecture? So this presentation theorizes the Visayan food that Portuguese navigator Ferdinand Magellan possibly ate during the last weeks of his life in the Visayas geography of the Philippines, from the expedition's landing on Homonhon Island, Samar, on March 17, 1521, until his death in the Battle of Mactan on April 27, 1521. The food that Magellan possibly ate will be inferred from the listed items found in Pigafetta's account of the expedition, as well as from its cracks in the parchment curtain. The Visayan food items that Magellan could have eaten here included young coconuts, honey, tuba or coconut wine, cooked rice, various species of fish prepared or cooked in different ways, pork, meat of a giant bat, and goat meat. So now, please feel free to ask questions through the comment section of this live stream, and we will accommodate them at the latter part of the lecture. So to introduce our speaker, let's hear again Ms. Ayesa Saiseng.
Our speaker for today is the author of Surat Binisaya, Deciphering Ancient Visayan Writing Language in 2017. Latest Samar Shadows, Essay on the History of Eastern Visayas, 2008. The Balangiga Conflict Revisited, which is a finalist for the 2003 National Book Award in History, and co-translator, co-editor of The Colonial Odyssey of Leyte, 1521 to 1914, winner of the 2006 National Book Award for Translation. These four books were published by the New Day Publishers. He is a lifetime member of the Philippine National Historical Society, where he is also a member of the editorial advisory board of the Journal of History and has edited a number of its recent issues. He served as Visayas representative for 2014, 2016, and 2017 to 2019 in the National Committee on Historical Research of the National Commission for Culture and the Arts, or NCHR-NCCA, and functioned as a secretariat of the NCHR Executive Council. He is full professor at the School of Health Sciences at the University of the Philippines, Manila, in Palo, Leyte. So let us all welcome Dr. Rolando O. Borinaga.
Maraming salamat. Magandang umaga sa ating lahat dito, sa mga nakikinig at saka nanonood ng lecture na ito. So I will share to you my slides for my lecture. Again, the the title is Theorizing the Visayan Food That Magellan Possibly Ate. And my presentation theorizes the Visayan food that Portuguese navigator Ferdinand Magellan possibly ate during the last 6 weeks of his life in Visayas geography of the Philippines, from the expedition's landing on Homonon Island, Samar on 17 March 1521 until his death at the Battle of Mactan on 27 April 1521. My sources and references include the Pigafetta account of the Magellan expedition, as well as its cracks in the parchment curtain, Charles Macupar's So Noble a Captain, the biography of Magellan, published in 1953. Lady Samar dictionaries, Sanchez, Vocabulario de la Lingua Bisaya, published in 1711, and the one by John Dewey Trump, published in 1995, as well as some personal knowledge of Visayan cooking and cuisine. The personalities, of course, here are Magellan and Pigafetta, who chronicled the events of that circumnavigation of the world. Okay, so the events in the Visayas actually started with the sailing of the Magellan expedition from the Ladrones to Samar from March 9 to 16. And so I had drawn up the route of the ships based on Albo's lag. And dawn on March 1521, they sighted highland and eventually reached the island of Samar late in the afternoon of that day. Albo noted that after sighting land, the expedition sailed towards the northwest, and when they saw that the land trended north, they turned south and came upon small island, of which they anchored for the night of the same day. Now, this is a photograph of Suluan Island. They anchored somewhere on to the left on the sea, to the left of the picture. And actually, the next day, they saw two bangkas rounding off that cape on the north, and then this banka saw the Spaniards. They turned around, and so that same day, March 17, Pigafetta wrote that Magellan desired to land on another island. They did not land on Suluan, which was inhabited and lay to the right of Samar in order to be more secure and to get water and have some rest. He had two tents set up on the shore for the sick and had a sow killed for them. Perhaps they were able to hunt mother pig on the island and butchered that for their food. You know? The island they landed was called the Humuno or Humonhon in later years. That's the 1899 map of Suluan, where they anchored for the night, and Humonhon, where they eventually landed. They actually landed somewhere here in the south of the island. Okay, so they go to the food item number one is pork from the sow that they butchered. And so they could have cooked it as pork stew, linaga nga baboy, so with softened meat and soup for the sick crew members resting under the tents. And for the others, they just boiled the pork, sinugba nga baboy. For the other members of the crew who had stronger teeth, and of course, they also shared with the pork stew that were cooked for the sick ones. Now, as for food items mentioned in Magellan biography by Parr, so second is greens or vegetables for salads for the sick. So I theorize that this must have been wild edible ferns, pako. And food item number three is taro root or gabi, which was a source of beneficial oil called poi. And then the fourth item is fruits, which Parr listed as mangosteen, mango, papaya, and custard apple. Now, item number 5 is fish, including rock cod. He used the American term, which I translated to tingag or lapu-lapu. And he listed a moray eel, which I doubt it was moray eel, probably barracuda, because he was referring to its saw-like teeth. So perhaps the fish were broiled, sinugba, stewed, tinula, or even kinilaw. No? And then, so the item number 6, other sea species, mollusks, shellfish, and octopus, some other sea species. Perhaps these were cooked in water also for the soup. Okay. At home, I took a picture of sinugbang tingag, lapu-lapu. Okay. In Humonon, Pigafetta drew a map of what could have been the original archipelago of San Lazaro, which was named on his feast day, 17 March, the day they landed at Humonhon. Although the island they landed was called Humuno, they also called it Aquada de Liboni Señale, the watering place of good signs, because they found 2 springs there of the clearest water, as well as the first signs of gold they found in the geography. And the map that Pigafetta drew of the area only Humuno had 2 labels. The gold items they saw perhaps were worn by the natives that they met. On the afternoon of Monday, 18 March 1521, the expedition members saw a boat coming towards them with 9 men in it. Once these men had landed on the beach, their leader went immediately to the Captain General and showed signs of joy at the foreigners' arrival. 5 of the most elaborately tattooed among them remained on shore, while the rest went to fetch the others who were still fishing until they all came. Now, when Magellan saw that the natives were reasonable men, he ordered food to be set before them and gave them red cups, mirrors, combs, bells, ivory, boccasin, and other things. In return for the captain's courtesy, the natives presented fish, a jar of palm wine, which they called oraka or arak, figs more than 1 palmo long, bananas, and others which were smaller and delicate, and 2 coconuts. And so from that list, I derived other food items: fish, probably cooked as broiled, sinogba, or stewed, and earlier, I listed it earlier, and then the new item is palm wine, tuba. And then the 8th is banana, saging. Presumably the ripening type, not the cooking variety. Of course, that's a modern version of tuba with its a glass of tuba and a gallon container. The natives became very familiar with the members of the expedition, and the latter took great pleasure with them because they were pleasant and conversable. The language translations were apparently provided by Enrique de Malaca, Magellan's servant and interpreter. The natives told the foreigners many things, including their names and the identities of some of the islands that could be seen from that place. They said that their island is called Suluan and that it was not very large. So I have here the figure of a photo of coconut trees. Okay. Nearly 1/3 of his Umuno narrative, Pigafetta described the coconut, the fruit, and the tree. Just as we have bread, wine, oil, and milk, so those people get everything from that tree. He wrote about its multi-use plant. He first described how wine could be tapped from the tree. Then he described the fruit, its parts and contents, as well as the process of extracting oil, vinegar, and milk from that fruit. Pigafetta's lengthy narrative of the coconut and mentioned that the natives were reasonable men suggests a a display of local hospitality that preceded the Spanish offer of food and gifts. So I prefer to think that even before the Spaniards showed hospitality to the natives who came to see them, I believe that the natives, at least the chief among them, made them an offer. So it's still practiced in rural areas in the Philippines. When you go visiting some uncle or some relative in their farm, the first thing they would do is say, "Panglamaw anay kita, let us go picnic in the groups to pick young coconuts, to drink its water and eat its soft meat." It's almost an automatic display of offer. No? This must have been ordered by the foremost chief to his followers soon after pleasantries were exchanged. Panglamaw is still practiced in many remote areas when visitors come around. So the food item I listed is young coconuts, which can be taken lamao, a refreshment item comprising of the soft meat of young coconut and its water, or just coconut water only, butong. No? This was the item, coconut water, that Magellan gave from his own hand to the sick members of his crew every morning until they recuperated. Okay, at the house we also have by occasional young coconut, and the way to do that is to make a chip with a bowl at the bottom to put a hole so that you can uh, drain the water from the fruit, and then from the husk you fashion out something like a spoon, so that when you when you cut the coconut in half later to remove uh, the soft meat, you already have a spoon to use. Now, after the native chiefs departed and promised to return in 4 days, they must have left behind at least 3 people, perhaps 2 slaves and a supervising timawa, to look after the needs of the Spanish visitors. Still part of our rural culture. If there are visitors, you leave somebody to serve, or at least to help them with the visitors with whatever they need and things to do. Now, these natives not mentioned by Pigafetta must have been his respondents and demonstrators in showing him everything about the coconut and its uses, for which Malacca translated. They must also have been his informants about the names of the islands in the vicinity and other details that he recorded. This is my interpretation. These are cracks in the parchment curtain that I mentioned in my method. No? Because there must have been a native left behind to climb the tall trees, to tap the tuba from the coconut, and to pick the exact young coconut fruits. It requires some expertise to identify which young coconut fruits to pick from the tree, which Magellan gave from his own hand every morning to the recuperating sick members of his crew. Now, the name of the place is Humuno, as recorded by Pigafetta, or Umunon, a place name that he never bothered to explain, written as Humunhon by the next generation of Spaniards. An Italian or Spaniard reading these two names would actually skip the letter H, and this would sound Umuno or Umunon. Now, what do these words mean in the Visayan language? Now, Umu is an abandoned beehive. The island's name has not yet been adequately explained in the literature, but its root word is Umu, a now forgotten Visayan word for honeyless hive, or the abandoned hive of the honeybee. In ancient times, Umu was a good fuel for torches and was also used for making candles. During the Spanish regime, Umu would be processed into beeswax, and this product would be used to pay one's tribute to the government instead of cash or some other product. The name that is properly announced as Umunon actually means that this island abounded in umo honeycombs. Although Pigafetta did not write this in his chronicle, we can presume that Magellan's men, guided by the Suluan natives who attended to their needs, also went around the island to gather umo from the forests, which they dried and used as fuel for their torches. It is possible that they experienced lighted nights in their galleons here in Umunhon for the first time after more than 3 months of dark nights while sailing across the Pacific Ocean. And so, from umo, then we go to the next food item, honey or dugus. In many instances, the beehives in the wild are still full of bees and not yet abandoned. Thus, the gatherers would have to build a fire and smoke the bees out of their hives. In the process, they would gather both the beehive and the honey contained in it. Honey gathered from the forest must have been consumed by the sick men of the Magellan expedition. It is rich in vitamin C, which at the time was not yet known as a cure for scurvy. It would seem that honey, more than coconut water, helped in the recovery of the sick men from their scurvy in Umunon. Okay, there's a photo here of a beehive with still bees in it. And then, actually, to get the honey, you have to smoke the bees out of their hive, but you have to be very careful because if you are not careful enough, they would attack you. You will suffer from a lot of bites, which can be very painful. Now, on Friday noon, March 20 to 1521, the natives came back as they had promised. They came in 2 boats with coconuts, sweet oranges, a jar of palm wine, and a cup. That's to show that there were fowls in the geography. They showed signs of great pleasure at seeing the members of the expedition who purchased all the items they bought. The senior among the natives was an old man who was tattooed. He wore 2 gold earrings in the ears, and the others had many gold armlets on their arms and kerchiefs around their head. And so, again, the items from the second visit are young coconuts, and the new item is pomelo. Perhaps the mentioned oranges, buongon, and then of course palm wine. Now is a photo of pomelo or buongon. That must have been the orange that Pigafetta mentioned. Now, in the afternoon of Holy Monday, March 25, the expedition members had returned to their ships, weighed anchors, and departed from Umunhon. The ship rowed towards the west-southwest between 4 islands of Sinalo, Hinangan, Ibuson, and Abarian. The next slide shows a map, first map of the Philippines, Murillo map in 1734, and I encircled with yellow there the island of now called Limasawa, but during the Magellan expedition it was still called Masawa. Now there's still the Limasawa versus Butuan controversy, and I defended the Limasawa claim and came up with actually a list of documents that showed that Limasawa was known as Masawa from pre-Spanish years. It was called Masawa by Pigafetta until it was still called Masawa until 1602. The oldest artifact that shows the Masawa name is the Limasawa pot, which I had discovered with 4 other people from the NCCA in 2015. There are characters for Masawa. They're in by buying. Now, the word Masawa got prefixed later in 1660s. It was called Dimasawa by Francisco Lin, Limasawa by Father Combes, and Limasawa by Father Alsina. It was Father Combes' Limasawa name that stuck because it was used in the first map by Murillo Velarde. There was always a debate on where was the harbor where the Magellan expedition landed. For a very long time, they thought it was southeast of the island, but Hines de Mafra and members of the Villalobos expedition said it was actually west of the island. And there's a paragraph in the Legazpi Chronicle where they met a single person on the island of Masawa, and in this photo, modern photo, I illustrated the movement of that person that they saw, which they actually drove them away. Now, as for the issue on where the Easter Sunday Mass in 1521, I had also argued to the Mujeres panel that this was in Western Masawa, and that this was the harbor. They circle here as the hilltop where the cross was planted, and the rectangle here is the place where the first Easter Sunday Mass could have been held. It's still occupied by the Catholic Church of the island of Limasawa. Okay, so in the second day after they had anchored in Masawa, the Masawa king visited Magellan, and they performed a kasi-kasi, and he offered gifts: ginger, basketful rice in 3 full porcelain jars, and fish, 2 large orade or dorado fish. Now, with ginger and fish available, some of the dorado fish must have been cooked as escabeche for Magellan, as viand for his rice. Of course, at the time, escabeche was not yet a Visayan cuisine. It was still a Spanish cuisine, which we had adopted during the colonial years. Okay, that's a photo of dorado fish being captured, which I downloaded from the internet. Binigyan sila ng 2 ganon kalaki na dorado. Now, the afternoon after the visit of Raha-Colombo to Magellan, Pigafetta and Enrique went down to the island with him, and they were able, after they arrived on the island, they sat at the stern of a balangay, and they were served food. Plate of pork, it was probably boiled and sliced, and a large jar filled with wine, tuba, which they drank from a porcelain cup. Pigafetta and Colombo drank from 1 cup, just 1 to themselves, and perhaps Enrique from another cup. Now, after that refreshment, supper, they had rice in 1 porcelain dish and pork with its gravy in another porcelain dish. Perhaps this was nilagang baboy. And then later, they went to Colombo's house, no longer then they had roast fish cut in pieces and served in a platter. Perhaps sinugbang dorado, part of the batch of dorado that were perhaps caught during the day. And they had ginger, freshly gathered, and again wine, tuba. And then later, the eldest son came, and they had fish and its sauce, probably paksiw, which was cooked in vinegar, rice in a platter, and again, tuba. Now, you have to realize that at that time, when they ate, hindi kagaya ngayon na kung kakain tayo, maraming pagkain. At that time, kahit naman si Raha-Colombo, yung kinakain lang, may rice, may isang bayan, and tuba. Just just those set of three items. Okay, so the most famous event in Masawa was the Easter Sunday Mass. In the morning, Magellan asked the priest to say that okay, they would like to perform some ceremonies, and then because they did not want to eat on the island, and so Colombo sent them two pigs that they had butchered. Dalawang pigs. No? The pork was presumably cooked as adobo, which was still a Spanish cuisine at the time, broiled, sinogba, or stewed, linaga. Now, after the cross-planting, after the mass, in the afternoon, they came back from the boat after lunch. Then they went for the cross-planting on the highest hill in the afternoon. After returning from the hill, the king, Colombo actually had some young coconuts brought in so that the Spaniards could have some refreshment. And presumably, they had palm wine to buy for the crew during the rest of the afternoon, because when they were supposed to leave the next day, Colombo and his brother Raha Shawi were apparently suffered from hangover. They were apparently drinking. They slept the whole day. And some of the crew members also felt sick. So they must have been suffering from hangover from drinking palm wine the day before. Okay, there's a photo here of young coconuts before it is cut, chip at the bottom to remove the water, and then cut later to scoop the meat. Okay, so the Magellan expedition left Masawa April 4, and towards the night of that day, they anchored off Gatigan Island, which I theorize as Imukilan. And the last island, there are bats as large as eagles. So it was late. We killed one of them, which resembled chicken in taste. So Magellan had tasted giant bat or kabog in Visayan language, and it tasted like chicken. Here's a photo of a giant bat which wings can spread up to 1.5 meters. Malaki yun. Okay, from there, Gatigan, they proceeded to Cebu, and when they landed in Cebu, April 7. Magellan sent his foster son, Cristobal Ravelo, which is apparently his illegitimate son by another woman, sent as ambassador to the king of Cebu with the interpreter Enrique. There were the food served to them are refreshments of many dishes, all made from meat and contained in porcelain platters, beside many jars of wine. So it's meat and wine. The prince and the king of Masawa presented some baskets of rice, wine, goats, and fowls to the captain general on behalf of their king. Mentioned earlier, among the gifts given to Magellan, had already mentioned earlier in the slides, was rice and pork. The new items are goat meat and chicken meat from the goats and the chicken that were given to them. Goat meat might have been cooked as caldereta, which was also still Spanish cooking at the time, spiced to neutralize the peculiar smell of goat meat. And of course, chicken meat could have been fried, broiled, or stewed. Now, Pigafetta and Enrique were sent by Magellan to take his gifts for Humabon in exchange. Now, Pigafetta noted that Humaban was eating turtle eggs, which were in 2 porcelain dishes, and he had 4 jars of palm wine in front of him, covered with sweet-smelling herbs and arranged with 4 small reeds in jars, each jar by means of which he drank. Pigafetta and companion ate some of those eggs and drank using the reeds, and perhaps brought some of those things to Magellan. And so it seems Magellan had also eaten some turtle eggs. It could be itlog sa pawikan. And drank some tuba. Then during a pig sacrifice ritual that Pigafetta recorded, he also noted the following delicacies: cakes of rice and millet, bibingka, and baked and wrapped in leaves, suman. And there was also roast fish, but I've already mentioned this earlier. So the new items that Magellan must have eaten are these local delicacies. They must have been given the first 2 delicacy items as gifts after the ritual. And of course, on April 27, 1521, Magellan was killed during the Battle of Mactan. The last items he received the day before were 2 goats from Sola, the other chief of Mactan, who somehow inspired him to fight Lapu-lapu, who refused to obey the king of Spain. And so we have here a summary of the list of Visayan food items that Magellan possibly ate: pork, greens, taro root, fruits, fish, other sea species, palm wine. All these were tasted in Humunon. Figs, bananas, young coconuts, honey, and pomelo. Up to here, Magellan must have tasted this in Humunon. Ginger and rice were tasted in addition to the other items earlier were tasted in Masawa. Giant bat was tasted in Gatigan Island, and goat meat, chicken meat, turtle eggs, and local delicacies were tasted in Cebu. A total of 18 food items that Magellan possibly ate when he was here in the Philippines. That's all. Maraming salamat po.
Ayan po, Sir Dr. Rolly, maraming salamat po sa magandang lecture na inihatid niyo sa amin. Actually po, pag sinasabi nating pagkain, no, parang lahat tayong Pilipino na curious tayo kung ano ba yung kinain ng mga sinuunang Pilipino, pati na rin yung mga crew ni Magellan, and specifically Magellan. So now, before we continue sa ating open forum, syempre dapat ating bigyan ng pagkilala yung ating mga viewers dito sa lecture na to. Kay J.H. Briones, Ven Vincent, Faith Razo, Hubert Escartilan Taho, si Sir Noel Gaton na curator ng Museo ni Ramon Magsaysay, hello po. Franz Julian Chiki, Christian Jan Solveza, senior shrine curator po ng Museo ni Mabini Tanawan, hello po Ma'am Olga Palakay. Fami Ali Makadato, and si Dr. April Hupcaso, hello ma'am, yung last week nating lecturer. Si Ma'am Lenita Mabini, of course, yung members po ng NQC Secretariat, especially kay Jerwil Cruz na siyang nag-handle ngayon ng ating live lecture. Ryan Reyes, Dags Manatad, Marin Castro, G. Rojas, Jana Saba, ang curator din po ng Museo ng Republika ng Pilipinas 1899, Sir Ruel Pagiligan. Yan, from Bohol. Hello po Ma'am Perlina Alo ng Museo ng Pamanang Bohol, and Irma Davis. So yun po, maraming salamat po sa panonood ng ating lecture. So now, ngayon dadako na po tayo sa open forum. Ayesha, meron ka bang may ibabahaging tanong dyan?
Pero bago yun, batiin ko lang muna yung curator ng Museo El Deposito dahil hindi siya nagsasawang i-accommodate tayo. Hello,
Ayun,
John
tama.
Rabusa.
Thank you, Jonel Rabusa. And Miss Sky, yan, ang HSDO ng Museo ng El Deposito.
Ayan, for the first question, sir, actually we have only a few questions po. Ang unang tanong, siguro mas clarification po, kung sinahumabon daw po ba ay Muslim, bakit daw po kumain ng baboy? So, Muslim po ba sinahumabon nung time na yun? Yun po yung question.
In fact, that's the best argument na hindi sila Muslim. Kumakain sila ng baboy.
Mhm. So, wala pa po silang religion during that time, sir?
Hindi naman walang religion. They have our ancient religion. We have our own pantheons of gods and goddesses and which we offer and things like that. But we had our own.
Pero definitely not Muslim po. So okay
Not
silang kumain ng baboy.
Definitely not Muslim. Baboy yung...
baboy yung unang nabanggit. Jubilin.
Ayan, meron pong message dito. Same lang daw po ba ang kinakain ng mga taga-Visayas sa mga pagkain ng taga-Luzon?
What is that?
Tinatanong po niya kung pareho lang daw po ba yung kinakain ng mga taga-Visayas sa pagkain ng mga taga-Luzon.
In many ways, except that may pagkakaiba. Yung tinola at saka sinigang, magkakaiba yung mga... Mas marami yung ingredients ng Tagalog sinigang kaysa tinola ng mga Visayas. In a sense, pareho pa rin, pero meron lang konting variations.
Okay po, thank you po Dr. Borinaga. So meron po tayong iba pang tanong from Nereo Kahilig Luhan. Sir, what do you think was used by the ancient Filipinos to remove the langsa in the fruit bats?
I am not very sure. I have not tasted that. Pero the most yung ginagamit palagi is coconut milk. They use coconut milk in cooking the fruit bat para mawala yung smell.
We have another question here po, sir. Anong uri kaya ng jar ang ginamit nila para sa palm wine? Yung porcelain na tasa, possible na galing sa mga Chinese?
Sigurado Chinese yon. Kasi walang porcelain dito sa Pilipinas. Cup at saka jars. Pero yung sa tuba, parang native jars yon.
So okay po, thank you po Dr. Borinaga. Ito, wala naman pong sa ngayon na nagtatanong pero gusto ko lang po i-shout out pa yung iba nating viewers. Hello po kay Ma'am Gloria Melencio. Sabi niyo po, congratulations Dr. Rolando Borinaga, mabuhay po kayo. Shout out din po kay Narwin Cardinosa Gonzales. Yan, nanonood po siya ngayon. And kay Francis Moraleda, hello from Naga. And kay Ma'am Net Jimenez po ng Malolos, Bulacan. Ito, may pahabol po na tanong. From Juan Enrique Taguines, with regards to the drinking habits of Filipinos prior to the Magallanes arrival, how can the drinking habits be described?
Okay, it is actually described by Pigafetta and Cebu. Filipinos were heavy drinkers, and also Father Chirino later, he also described Filipinos as heavy drinkers. But in old times, we drank the fresh tuba. Not it's not actually full of alcohol. It just makes you noisy and doesn't actually makes you drunk. You have to drink a lot of quantity so that you become drunk. But heavy drinkers yun talaga, heavy drinkers yung ancient Filipinos.
Ayan sir, may nagpapa-thank you daw, nagpapa-thank you po sa inyo si Juan Enrique Tagines. Thank you very much po. Very informative po.
Welcome.
For now po wala pa pong question. So if ever po yung mga viewers natin ay magkaroon pa ng mga questions after this lecture, pwede po tayong mag-message via our Facebook page ng NQC at ibabato po namin kay Dr. Rolly para masagot niya po. Pero meron pong isa, medyo off topic po. Pero itanong ko na rin po, how did Magellan's men treated the native women then? Based sa Pigafetta accounts po.
Actually, Magellan did not see a lot of women until they got to Cebu. And he was actually one of his worries is that perhaps the crew members were already cavorting with Cebuano women, and he was worried na hindi pa sila baptized. And so parang he was very anxious na maging baptized yung Cebuanos because for them it's a great sin na makika-communicate with the women na hindi baptized yung mga tauhan.
We have another question po. Maybe this is the one last question po na i-entertain natin. Ang Philippine pigs po ba ay katulad ng pigs po sa Europa? Sa Visayas lang po ba makikita ang pigs sa Pilipinas? Maraming salamat po.
Marami namang saging dito sa Pilipinas. Actually, I think it was Father Alcena who said that there are at least 30 different species of bananas in the Visayas alone. So, there's a lot of choices.
Ayan, again, sa mga magtatanong po sa atin, after this lecture, mag-message lang po tayo sa NQC Facebook page. Meron po ditong question na hindi about sa lecture, pero ang question po niya ay ano daw po yung title ng pinatugtog na intro song. So yun, sa nagtatanong po kung ano yung title ng song na pinili po namin kanina, yun po ay Mactan by Kian Jonsho. So, inaanyayahan din po namin kayo na i-follow po yung Spotify po namin na 500 Years Philippines. So, nandyan po yung Quincentennial playlist at I'm sure magugustuhan nyo po yung linya ng mga songs na pinroduce for this commemorations. At syempre, inaanyayahan din namin po lahat yung time lahat na i-follow yung YouTube channel ng National Quincentennial Committee at abangan po natin yung amin pong ilo-launch na website on online lecture portal kung saan pwede tayo mag-register for sa susunod na lectures at pwede nating balikan yung mga past lectures ng NQC. Ayan. So once again po, thank you so much po, Dr. Rolly. Ayan, balikan ko lang po yung iba pong mga nabanggit nyo po kanina na naging parang tumatak sa akin. Ayan. So during the pre-Hispanic Philippines noong 1521, pagdating ni Magellan, talagang innate na po pala talaga sa mga Pilipino yung pagiging hospitable. Kung titingnan natin yung listahan ng maraming pagkain na inoffer ng ating mga ninuno kina Magellan. So ilan po sa mga nabanggit ay pork, nilagang baboy, sinugba, ayan, greens, pako, gabi. Yung pako po kasi favorite ko yan, kaya natandaan ko. Ayan, fruits, mangosteen, banana, pomelo. Yun lang po ilan lamang sa mga fruits na i-offer. Yung honey, kasi naalala po natin na during that time, nung dumating si Magellan, mga may sakit na at gutom na gutom yung mga crews. So bukod po sa coconut water, honey ay naging important food na kinain nila na rich sa vitamin C na possibly ay naging reason kung bakit madali din yung kanilang pag-recover. Ayan, they have the ginger po. Siyempre, rice. Hindi mawawala ang rice. At sa variety ng rice, nag-offer sila ng bibingka at suman. So during that time, may suman na po pala. Ayan. Tapos sa fish naman po, may dalawa tayong nabanggit na Spanish dish na ginawa sa fish. Yung una po, escabeche. Yung pangalawa, adobo. So, ayun. So, akala ko dati yung adobo, innate na Philippine dish siya. Yung pala, Spanish po pala siya. Mm-mm. Ayan. Tapos, during that time, kumain din sina Magellan ng giant bat. So, naging controversial ngayon dahil sa coronavirus yung bat. Pero during that time pala, meron na rin tayong history ng pagkain ng bats. Ayan. Dati kumakain din ng turtle eggs. Pero ngayon, hindi na pwede ng turtle eggs. Pero during that time, siguro dahil marami pa yung supply ng turtle eggs that time, kumain din sila ng turtle eggs. So, all in all po, they have 18 food items na possibly ay 18 food items na nalista based sa Pigafetta account. So, yun po ay ilan sa mga nakuha kong lessons from this lecture. So, Jubilin, may i-add ka pa ba?
Ayun, so bago tayo tuluyang magtapos, no, inaanyayahan ko po lahat ng mga mahuhusay, malilikhaing kabataang Pilipino na sumali po sa Batang Bagani. And wag niyo rin pong kalimutan na available na din po for download ang ating Quincentennial Paper Dolls. So bisitahin niyo lamang po ang aming website, National Quincentennial Commemorations website po. So downloadable po dun lahat. And ngayon din po, currently, ongoing na din po yung ating Lapu-lapu Monument Competition. So sa mga talented din nating mga Pilipino na mahuhusay sa pagdodrawing or sa sculpture, sali din po kayo. And ito po, ngayong darating na linggo din ay ilo-launch na din po namin ang Himig Bagani music cover. So sa mga musikero po nating mga kaibigan dyan, tatanggap na po kami sa susunod ng inyong own rendition po ng Bagani. And later, within the week ay maglalabas din po kami ng mechanics. So yun lamang po, maraming salamat po. Binabalik ko na po kay Miss Ayesha Saise.
Ayan. Once again, thank you po, Dr. Rolly. Meron po ba kayong parting message, Sir Rolly?
Okay, so my parting message is that on the importance of coconut, actually. During the Magellan expedition, very useful yung coconut for the recovery of the sick members of the expedition, of course, honey. And in our time, it seems we have to use also not only our coconuts, but the real coconuts, because coconut oil, in fact, has antiviral properties that can disable the coronavirus, while we still do not have the cure, the drug, and the vaccine against COVID-19. So that's my advocacy nowadays: coconut oil and tuba.
And tuba. Tuba. Inom tayo ng tuba. Ayan. Thank you so much po. Sa next lectures po natin ay sa August. We have 2 countdown to 500 online lectures at meron pa po isang webinar for the Road to 500 with Congressman Lauren Legarda. So ayun po, keep tuning in po sa National Quincentennial Committee at thank you so much po for supporting us sa commemoration ito. Once again, thank you.
Sige.